This meeting. Sorry, I did the recording in progress. So with that, I want to proceed and call the meeting to order. I'd like to call this being our 7th meeting of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. If you would like to ask a question or give comment today, please use the raise your hand function and you will be called upon. We also ask that you turn on your camera so that your name appears when you speak. Please feel free to cover the camera on your device if you don't want to actually appear on the screen. Lastly, I need to reiterate that if you have not returned your conflict of interest form at this time, you are not permitted to participate in any motions or votes today. And that is per our guidelines. With that, Julia, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Councilman Gordon. Can you go to the next slide, please?
I am fine. Sorry about this. I'm having some technical difficulties. One moment.
I'm gonna get started. Is the representative is the representative of the District 6 council person present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill Community CDC or Hill CDC present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Federal Credit Union present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Consensus Group present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Wesley Center AME Zion Church present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Shenley Heights Community Development Program present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Historic Hills Institute present? Is the representative of the Representative Ariane Abney's office present? Is the representative of the office of the Allegheny County Executive Fitzgerald present?
Present.
Is the representative of the office of Mayor Ed Gainey present? Is the representative of the Pittsburgh Public Schools present? Is the representative of the Ujamaa Collective present? All right, that is a roll call. Thank you so much, Lavelle, Councilman Lavelle. Hannah, can you tell us if we have quorum?
I do believe that is quorum.
Yeah, I believe we do. With that, although 2 of the individuals are not here presently with us yet, I would like to welcome 3 new members of the advisory board. Jamal Craig is going to be representing the office of Representative Ariane Abney. Dan Bish, who is with us, is here on behalf of the office of County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, and Lisa Frank, who I presume will be joining us, is representing the office of Mayor Ed Gainey. And I don't think we did it the last time. I don't think she's with us yet, but I also would just like to recognize Lakeisha Wolf formally for coming on to this board as well, representing the Ujamaa Collective in the community. With that, I want to go over to old business. The next Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Advisory Board meeting will be held the week of October 24th with a target date and time of Thursday, October, what date is that? 27th at 3 p.m. Sorry. I I need a motion. Do I have a motion to direct URA staff to schedule the next meeting of this board for the week of October 24th, targeting October 27th at 3 p.m.?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. URA staff will schedule the next meeting. Thank you all. That now will move us on to our allocation plan. At the last advisory board meeting, at the direction of the co-chairs, URA staff created and presented indistinguishable, slides from the 4 received allocation plans that we have. One by the Hill CDC, one by the URA, one was presented by R.B. Bankson, and then one was presented by Dr. Ellis, except to different data values. The advisory board tasked URA staff to make edits to what was then Exhibit E, which was the average of the 4 plans. James Reed of the URA is here to present Exhibit E and his recommendations. Then we will open the floor for discussion. James, are you able to go into the presentation?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you for bringing that slide up. As the councilman stated, what we're seeing here is Exhibit E, which is, in a sense, the compromise version of all of the 4 options that were weighed before in terms of the allocation plan for the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund. I will allow the advisory committee as well as URA staff a few moments to walk through this silently. And, if there are any questions as relates to the chart, please feel free to ask those at this time.
Thank you. And before we proceed, I just want to, for the record, acknowledge that Lakeisha Wolf has joined us.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hearing no questions, I will ask my colleagues to move to the next slide to have a series of recommendations. First recommendation, the URA staff recommends adopting the allocation table as presented. And we recommend doing so, noting that this particular allocation plan will guide the year 2023. And we would ask that members reconvene during the second half of 2023 to set an allocation for 2024. The rationale behind this recommendation is that going into 2023, we have not had any applications, we have not dispersed any funds, and so we do not have a good sense of what the demand and appetite is for any of the particular funding categories that are in the allocation plan. So we would like to move forward with the 2023 allocation plan in order to have a year, approximately 6 months to 9 months worth of activity underneath the fund in order to consider and adjust any particular categories or dollar amounts associated with any of the items on the particular allocation fund. The next recommendation would be to revisit the allocation plan on an annual basis. That way, the fund can consistently respond to demand. In the next recommendation, URA staff would like to allocate a maximum of $1.5 million for 2023. And then lastly, URA staff recommends hiring an investment manager or a similar position to devise and implement an investment strategy for monies allocated under reoccurring revenue initiatives under community control. And with that, I will pause and open the floor for any questions regarding these recommendations.
Thank you. I do see we have Arby has raised his hand. Arby?
Yeah, I didn't realize that he was waiting for questions on the allocation plan. Can you go back to the previous slide? Okay, so where I see development initiatives of 31%, can you explain what you intend to group into that development initiatives category?
So, development initiatives, actually, to take a step back, just want to recall for the advisory board that all of these categories are ones that were identified in the CSIP and are also a part of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund guidelines. So as to your specific question regarding what development initiatives can entail, I think, that largely is going to be in the traditional bucket of development. So that could be projects that are real estate development, business development. There's generally some broadness and latitude here, so that honestly, the advisory board, as they are considering applications as they come in, you all can, determine which buckets these fit into a little more. If the advisory board would like to see something more prescriptive around these definitions, I think URA staff would be willing to work together to draft some definitions for these categories.
So essentially, you're telling me that this is basically brick and mortar.
It can be. What I'm trying to stress is that there is some broadness here, and that, traditionally, yes, development initiatives we think of as brick and mortar, but I think there is some broadness and latitude depending on the applications that would come in for consideration to ultimately determine, which one of these buckets it would need to fall into.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking these questions is I don't see anything that will address development of a residence. And the reason for that is, well, the median income is in the low 20s, 20,000. And how we address that, other than this job placement programs and workforce development initiatives, there's other things that need to go into that in regards to getting people prepared to go into the workforce. So that's one thing. The other thing, when I look at the CSIP, we got workforce development initiatives. Okay, so see that? Job placement programs, okay? NWBE business development counseling program. So I see, okay, and children and youth, rent assistance subsidies, mortgage assistance subsidies, but I don't see reoccurring revenue initiatives.
If you look towards the third line item from the bottom, reoccurring revenue initiatives under community control, that's set at 15% and 225,000 if we advance the recommended path.
Well, I understand that, but it's not in the list from the CSIP. And the statement was that these are all in the CSIP. That's not there.
Unfortunately, I do not have a copy of the CSIP in front of me, but I do have a copy of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund guidelines, and that option is in Exhibit D, which is eligible uses for reinvestment fund and proceeds.
Well, here's the thing. page 23, the CSIP doesn't have that, and it doesn't have those historic hill institutional preservation. So neither one of those are in the CSIP. So I'm struggling to how this exhibit E is accurate. So we need to reconcile that.
I can reconcile it because these were the recommendations that were brought forward through the various 4 plans. And these were recommendations that at our last meeting, everyone agreed to in terms of these line items.
I understand that, Daniel, but we also have to comply with the CSIP. And so how do we reconcile that? Because it's not a category. So my point is, either we're going to comply with the CSIP, Robert Rules of Order, or we're not. And operating and functioning in the gray area is only going to cause an issue in the future. So we need to be consistent. That's my point. Okay, so I don't have a problem with one of the categories, but they're not adequately defined, and we need to reconcile that. Okay, so that's a summary of my comments. I have more comments, but in essence of time, that's all I'll say for that. And going to the second page, if you can flip to the second page. Okay, so URA staff recommends hiring an investment manager to devise and implement an investment strategy for monies allocated under reoccurring revenue initiatives under community control. Need to have something in writing as to what that means. And my proposal is looking at sustainability of the fund and hiring an investment manager. We will probably spend more money paying the investment manager than we will receive in regards to return. Right now, the 6-month bond is 4%. Okay, the Fed just raised interest rates, federal funds rate, 0.75%, or 75 basis points yesterday. So there's more to it. The market itself is not going to give us a return. It's probably going to give us a negative. So that needs to be reconciled and needs to have more discussion, because I don't see where that's going to help sustain the fund. Thank you.
Thank you. And just 2 notes to RB's concerns about reconciling. Once we actually call for the vote, that can be done. I would also just note that in the CSIP, number 7 is coordinated community development, and this loosely aligns with that. I have Lakeisha Wolf next.
Thank you. So I guess, I don't want to reiterate what RB said, but I guess, yes, I would agree that we need to have some clarification and details, right, in terms of the, all of these uses, right? Like, what does each one mean, so that we kind of have a shared and inclusive understanding of what each one is. Because, for instance, I'm wondering, so the category of development initiatives, right, for the Hill District, how and why that is differentiated from the MWBE piece. So I'm not really sure why those 2 are separated, right? Because my understanding is that that would be a focus in all of our development, especially around brick and mortar. And then 2, just to really echo what Archie was saying around the development of people, and really looking at maybe having, not now, but perhaps having some more conversation about what that could look like. That includes a workforce, but perhaps other things. So yeah, that's it for my comments.
If I may, Ms. Wolf, take your question regarding why there's a differentiation between development initiatives and MWBE development initiatives. I think practically speaking, the question here is, will there be, applications from folks who are doing development initiatives that are not MWBE firms? And if so, will they have an opportunity to access any funds if they are advancing a project, that fits within the community needs and the guidelines and underneath that category? So I think that was the reason for that in being included, to make sure that other folks who were outside of MWBE firms could potentially have the opportunity if they were advancing a project that fit well.
Okay. I mean, I guess I get what you're saying. I think my concern would be the major difference in the amount of money that is allocated to each of those categories. So I feel like that's something that we would want to look at, and then what this, that's not necessarily my direct wheelhouse. But again, right, like thinking about this particular neighborhood and the principles around the neighborhood, that anybody else coming in to develop the neighborhood, right, that there's still other hiring that would need to take place, right, and that would be still a major focus, right? And so again, just thinking about the differences in the amount of money in those two categories.
Yes. Yes, understand your concerns. I will also say that one thing I want to stress about this allocation plan, it is the general guidelines for how funding will be spent in 2023. And I am hesitant that the committee may be too focused on being prescriptive on the category names and amounts, and that may not reflect the reality of the applications that we receive. And so, we took an approach to try to be broad here and a little more general, to essentially allow for the first year really to see what type of applications would come in. And then in subsequent years, right, the committee can certainly adjust the percentages and allocated to each of these line items. And so I think for this year, given the amount, or for 2023, given the amount of uncertainty around how many applications we may expect to receive, what the request for funding may be, a general approach may allow us to be more flexible on the front end. And then once applications come in, are being evaluated by the committee, then there's the opportunity to hone in on and really think about the impact and the need for the neighborhood, and wait to all of the applications that are actually received.
Thank you. Richard?
Yes, good afternoon all. My comments has to do with, it's more like around technical aspect of it all. If you go to that next page, please. And James, it sort of piggybacks on what you just said about subsequent years. On bullet number 3, you said that we propose to do 1.5 million in 2023. I believe that we should, even if it's flexible or if it's fluid or can be changed. I think that we should plan on or set a goal to expend, you know, I don't know, $2 million in 2024 and $3 million in 2025. You know, have those goals in place so that we'll have a target as to which to shoot for. You know, because just saying 1.5 in the first year is sort of like, you know, short-term thinking. And if we have a goal and an aspiration to do X amount in subsequent years, that will give us more incentive and more, you know, encouragement to reach our goals. You know, so I would just like to see that we have a plan or some type of aspiration to do things and with the rest of the money, the other $6 million over the next 3 or 4 years or something like that, targeted dollar amounts.
So to that point, Richard, the intent here was to just begin the process. But to your point, this would become an annual process, which by we would be able to assess, did we get $3 million of requests in, or did we only get 750,000? And then based upon what actually comes in, when you do this annually, you'll be able to set the goal for 2024, which is we now know we need to spend about 2.5 million to actually effectuate the community, or versus we need to spend 3, whatever that is. So
Right.
The intent was not to determine for you in future years how much you would need to spend, but rather get ourselves going and then make an annual assessment of that.
Yeah, it's not about how much we need to spend. It's about how much we plan to spend, how we want to invest. You know, that would give us, you know, give people the encouragement to say, well, we plan on spending $2 million in 2024, for example. So we got to do what we have to do this year, get the applications in, get the money turned over so that we can attain our goals. You know, so I guess it's, you know, 6 in one hand, half the other, but it just seems better. It seems more realistic to have sort of like maybe a 3-year plan as opposed to a 1-year plan. This is like living paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, you know, without really planning and budgeting for it. Just my opinion, you know.
Thank you. Alicia?
Hello, thank you. I have, I guess, comment question about the last line item, other wealth building initiatives. What will that entail? Because the way it looks like we just have $35,000 sitting there to be used without a specific determination of how it's to be used or what it's to be used for. Can you provide some clarity with that, please?
I think what entails on other wealth building initiatives. So when we think about what are the opportunities to really build wealth, we think about business ownership, home ownership, investment in stocks, bonds, all of that sort of thing as the primary vehicles of generating wealth. I think the point, again, with all of this is to allow some creativity from, you know, folks who would submit applications to pitch something that would be a wealth building initiative, either at the community level, meaning through, you know, institutions, or through some sort of creative means that may actually produce some sort of return for individuals who are a part of the community. At this point, I think it's very challenging to, quite frankly, understand what are the possibilities that could flow underneath that. And I do understand that it reads as broad and vague. And so I certainly understand that there can be frustration around that. But I think in terms of, you know, releasing an application, we can certainly, you know, put some examples to guide what may come in terms of applications. But for for the purposes of this meeting right now, even though I know it is frustrating and not a satisfactory response, I think the general point here is that there may be some opportunities that would come in to build wealth for either the community at large or individual members of the community that don't immediately fit underneath these other categories.
And just to sort of follow up on that, the committee needs to understand that this sort of allocation plan is not hard and fast. These are recommended spending allocations. No dollars will necessarily just sit there because we haven't received an application. So to Lakeisha's point earlier, if we needed to take that 30,000 and put it into MWBE development initiatives, we certainly have that ability. This is just a framework by which we should look at how we're going to potentially spend. But this is not hard and fast, and the committee can certainly make changes as we go. Did you have any other questions?
No, thank you. I just wanted to see, because I was trying to envision that allocation, and honestly, I was duplicating what was in the other allocations, and I just couldn't come up with a way to satisfy it. But thank you. That's fine.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for first round?
Wait, is
Say
that
that again,
this?
Danny?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I have hands raised from individuals who have already spoken. So I want to get to those who have not yet chimed in before I go to the second round of. So
Understood.
if you're wishing to speak now, Kim, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I had well, there's several questions and issues. One, James, are you new? And I apologize for being late because I, you know, there's a lot going on. But James, I was just wondering, were you new to the
No.
URA?
No, I've been at the URA for about 5 years now, just in a variety of different capacities.
All right. So you're new to working on this project?
No, he's
Relatively
working on this
speaking.
project since the very beginning.
Okay. And were you at the community meeting when the URA presented? I'm sorry, I just don't remember because there were a lot of URA staff there.
No, I was not.
No.
Okay. All right. All right. So I have a radical suggestion, and I have some other. I don't generally have an issue with like the categories here. I do know what the CSIP is. I totally understand RB's objections, you know, as well. But at the same time, the CSIP could use some tweaking, really. So in some ways, this is like our real-time tweaking of where we think like some of the money should go. But one, I just want to remind everybody that we're already behind. The community expected to have some of this money already in their hand in 2022. I think that the $1,500,000 is too low, and my radical suggestion is to double it. And I say that because, first of all, it may not be you, and this is no attack on you, James. This is why I asked you the question. Everybody else on this call that is not like a URA staff and or that's not new has heard the desperation and the sense of urgency and the requests. Like some people have already said they've sent in information or they've made inquiries. So with all due respect to James's comments, we actually do know what people want. And we may not know exactly what they want in every single category, but this idea that there's all this uncertainty, no, there's not this uncertainty. And that's the issue. And for this to be the amount for 2023, as opposed to what we should be dealing with, the information that comes in still from 2022, we should allot that. And then we should also go into 2023 with another revenue source, because our neighborhood is highly desired. Anybody that owns a home gets 2 and 3 calls or text messages every single day about selling our property. The market is coming, right? This is the whole point for the Lower Hill LRTA monies coming through, was to one, prevent gentrification, to shore up our housing, and to build up our development in our neighborhood. That's the point. So to start off with $1.5 million for next year is too low. It's way too low. Then when it comes to the prescription, what our neighbors have told us is that, one, from the Hill Growth Fund to this fund, they're concerned. They have very real, legitimate concerns about where the money's going to go. Sorry. They have concerns about where the money's going to go. They have concerns about self-dealing. There's some trust issues. So we just have to be honest about that, and to leave these sort of categories open, development initiatives. No, we do need to be more prescriptive, and bare minimum, we need to be exacting about entities that should not receive these funds immediately, right? I think that it's really, really important to do that for transparency reasons and everything else. I want to remind everybody that the Housing Opportunity Fund that is coming out of, Block E, the parking garage, those monies don't come right away. So the shoring up of our houses, I mean, we have mortgage assistance, we have rent assistance, right? Do we have, is housing assistance, like literally housing development, is that supposed to come up under the development initiatives?
Yes, it can.
Well, you see, so this is what I'm saying. The number one issue in the Hill District is housing. It is protecting the people who live there now to shore up their housing. I thought, and pardon me for missing the meeting, but I thought that we had already discussed that housing should have its own category. And a part of what came up was, well, we have the Housing Opportunity Fund, right? But the other issue was, we don't know when that money is coming. And we actually have this money here. And like I said, people are getting calls every single day, sell your house, grandma, give it up, you know what I mean? All of this, don't you need money right now? And of course, when you live in a lower class, working community, of course, everybody needs money right now. So they're thinking like, okay, maybe I should just move on. So the housing, we need a section for that. We absolutely have to have a section for that. And so that's another reason why development initiatives is way too broad. It's not enough, and not enough money is allocated. And then I'll go to MWBE real quick. So as was discussed in previous meetings, MWBE, if you're working on development initiatives, bare minimum, you need at least $10,000 to really $50,000 to start. So if you're looking at this MWBE allocation, this is going to support basically 2 to 3 people. That's what you're saying. This is what we're saying when we allot this level of money, is that we are supporting 2 or 3 minority and women businesses with $120,000 over the entire course of 2023. It's not acceptable. It's not right. And we are in a sense of urgency. So this is why I'm saying that this whole budget should be doubled, that we need to be clear about housing development, that we need to be prescriptive about excluding certain entities that people really believe are involved in self-dealing. And we need to just continue to refine this plan. But I would not move forward with this plan as it is, with this allocation as it is. No way. With all due respect.
No offense taken, Dr. Ellis. I understand the importance of these funds for the community, and I sincerely hope no one on the advisory committee thinks that the dollar amounts associated with this, the 1.5 million, came from any sense of malice or intent to deny the community what it needs, because that's certainly not it. It simply comes from a perspective of, quite honestly, some informational ignorance on my part, not having, I am not receiving the information that you all receive in terms of folks expressing need for these funds. That information has not made its way to me, and I certainly encourage anyone on the committee to reach out to me. I'm certainly happy to have conversations with anyone really to better and more deeply understand the information that you're getting, because more information is always better and results in a better product. So there's no offense taken there. As to the dollar amount, I am certainly not tied to a dollar amount for expending from the year. It simply comes from a little bit more of a relatively conservative perspective. And I think I just want to double down on something that the councilman mentioned earlier, which is that, you know, what we are talking about here are guidelines, are a framework, and in real time, as the applications are coming in, this advisory committee has the opportunity to review those and determine, you know, we have 10 applications for this particular need. We don't want, you know, developer A, B, and C to have access because they have a bad reputation, they haven't done good work, etc. Like, that ability happens. And so what I'm trying to stress is that knowing that there's need out there, proceeding with this framework, however imperfect it is, provides an opportunity to make sure that the applications and the funding are open, and then provides further opportunity as guideposts, right? Because quite honestly, when the applications come in, they need to get evaluated by this committee. And this committee then, you know, makes recommendations on what gets funded. And so there is another lever of power and another lever of gatekeeping. So I would stress and really try to impress on you all not to let this be the sole mechanism for influencing what gets funded and what doesn't get funded.
Yeah, I hear you, James, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of us on this call can give you some information. I also want to invite you to an October 3rd community meeting that's being had. I think it's really important for you to hear, as well as everybody else on the call, what's going on in the neighborhood. I want to stress that we actually, I've been doing this a long time, and I want to stress that we actually, if we can adopt some changes like tonight, because I do want to move forward. I'm going to recommend that we go ahead and double the budget tonight, and that we make just a couple of quick changes that we can put in. We can put them in tonight, but I think that I do not highly recommend moving forward with what we have presented on this screen right now around, you know, because of ignorance or uncertainty and so on and so we don't have that. So there's a lot of urgency, there's a lot of need. And our community needs to feel the arms of protection from this committee. This is what we're saying. When we allot a certain amount of money, we're saying, this is how much we care about your project and you and your house and your roof. You know, it's very specific. So I'm going to highly recommend that we actually double this budget tonight, and we just get a little bit prescriptive around those development initiatives, and then I'm fine.
To your point of urgency, Dr. Ellis, and to James's point of trying to reiterate, this is not prescriptive. I don't have a vote. It's my personal recommendation that this committee needs to move this forward now. In 3 months, if this committee determines it needs to double the budget, it can certainly do that. But I think if we get into a conversation of adjusting the budget here and now, unfortunately, a year into this, you probably will not have a budget or not even a guideline.
Well, can we just take a quick vote now to see if we can just double the budget? I mean, that's something very basic.
If you make a motion.
Sure. Well, I make a motion based on what I expressed earlier, that we actually double the budget because this is for all of 2023. We still have some 2023. I'm probably messing up here, Daniel. So sorry. Let me start over. I'm going to make a motion based on everything that I discussed earlier, that we actually double the budget now, and gives us the flexibility to do the types of things that we know need to be done in our neighborhood urgently, and so that we can move this process forward tonight.
There was a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion dies.
Well, let me say this.
Hold on, Arby, please. There are other hands.
I'm trying to understand. I kind of agree with Kim, but not entirely. And I would like to second, but I would kind of want to revise it so much. So that's where I'm at. And I'm not sure, we've done this before. I don't remember in a while, but
There was a motion. It was not seconded.
I would like to.
Therefore, we need to continue forward. And the next hand that was raised was, is there anyone else for a first round of discussion? Seeing none, second round, Lakeisha.
Yeah, I mean, and to Kim's point, I think that, you know, that number is a little low, and I think that maybe we just need to have more discussion before it's up, because I do feel like the number needs to be different. I guess it's two questions, and forgive me because I haven't been to all of the meetings since it started. So I just want to be clear on who is eligible for this fund, right? Is it for-profit, nonprofit, individuals who live in the neighborhood, right? Is that clear? And then the second question, right, and I'm assuming this comes out of the administrative line item, right, is how will we be spreading the word about the fund, right? I know that oftentimes when things are happening in the neighborhood, we do this real sort of high level like information thing, and folks who actually really need support or really need to make a vote, right, are not actually included. They don't even know what's happening. They don't get the information because everybody's not on social media, right? Like everybody's not able to, be on an email list specifically, right? So how are we making this accessible to our community, knowing that everybody is, does not have accessibility? So that, yeah, those are my two questions.
So I would like to
Sorry, Councilman, if I could just interject really quickly on the administrative line item. Those monies, it's contemplated that those monies can be used for implementation and administration of the fund, communications, reporting, tracking, and then, if there is a need for fund management consultants, that can also come out of it. So the administrative line item could be utilized for communications to advertise the fund's availability.
I was simply going to say, Lakeisha, the second part of your question in terms of how we advertise, how we get the word out, I was going to ask us to take that separately. Thus deal with the vote of the actual allocation plan, take that secondly, because our next agenda item was actually working on the actual application itself. Arby.
But really quickly,
Oh, sorry.
The other question wasn't answered, right? Who can apply for the fund specifically?
I
know Kim also brought up the issue of who perhaps should not apply for the fund, right? So who can apply for the fund? Have we talked specifically about that and kind of laid that out?
We have discussed who we would like to fund. We have not made a determination that no one is allowed to apply. As of now, an individual or entity seeking any grant, Julie actually put it in the guidelines, what it says in the guidelines. In the guidelines, it says An individual or entity seeking any sort of grant, loan, or financial commitment, or the establishment of any other type of relationship with the reinvestment fund an applicant may submit. So essentially, anyone can. This committee's job is determining whether or not you feel it's appropriate. Reverend Grayson has raised his hand, so I'd like to go to him next. He has not spoken yet.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Back to the budget, I think in line item of, we decided 1.5 million for this year. I think in the second exhibit, if we simply said potentially 1.5 to 2 million, which gives us a leverage, it may satisfy more people. So that's more of a suggestion that we don't double it, but we simply say in that item that for 2023, we'll allocate a budget between 1.5, which is the minimum, and 2 million.
This is a question for you, Reverend Grayson, since you mentioned that. Or would you prefer to have language that said 1.5 or as determined in the future by the executive committee?
For the first, again, I think the goal is to make it happen. And I think we just think enough to trust it, that we just want to, I don't want to go to another meeting, especially October 3rd, and say again, nothing has been done. But if I simply say that we have agreed on this, it'll be out, and we have a range of 1.5 to 2 million. And again, we can then still in 6 months revisit that, but at least it gives us a little more maybe physical, mental a range of, okay, I got it, that we're not totally going through it in 1 year, but that gives us a little bit more leverage. And then in that, once the applications come in, we'll get a better sense of how we potentially may allocate the other $500,000. But that gives us year one as we work on assessing, where we are, because we want something to happen. For transparency, I just don't want to serve on this committee again if we leave here again a year in with nothing happening. I can't take much more.
So do you want to make that a formal motion, Rev?
It's not even a motion. I think if you look at the exhibit, it would just simply extend the recommendation, and hopefully it could be a motive from 1 point. I'll make a motion that we extend the recommendation of expenditures from 2023 from 1.5 to $2 million.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Can I make a friendly amendment? Is that?
It needs to be seconded first.
Oh, I second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion, Kimberly?
Yeah, I wanted to make a friendly amendment, Reverend Grayson, that we would say up to 3 million, because we don't know what the demand is going to be. And
can we get, the goal is to get it going, so we can always come back. But if we it's a compromise, unless we gotta learn. If we don't learn to compromise, we'll never get anywhere. So allow us. That's a compromise. I hear you. I hear the people. I hear myself. That's giving us a range of $2 million in year one. I think that's a good, acceptable. That's my own opinion of a compromise of getting closer to where we may want to be.
So there was a motion for it to be 1.5 to 2 million. Is there any further discussion? And it was
you have a question about increasing it to by $500,000. Let's say that we expend in 2023 the whole 1.5 million. How will the additional 500,000 be determined? How would it be spent? How do we say, well, we'll spend it on this, that, or what are the guidelines along those lines?
Again, it's an active committee that has the power to vote on every decision. It just gives us the latitude to up to $2 million. I think we're getting more, since there's so many unknowns. Allow us to get started with what the community has been asking for the last year. And we have leverage to go to 2 million. And then we can come back and say, we think we should put this in housing or put this other $500,000 in more development. We have that latitude because we're still an ongoing active committee.
I agree. I agree with you that we should have that latitude and that cushion, so to speak. But we also should have a process as to how we would expend anything over and above the allocated amount.
This committee has been processed. I'm sorry.
Hold on, Rev. what I'm gonna
This
ask.
committee has been processing for 2 months. Can we make something happen? For the first time, we have been, for those who are new, we have been the stretch of one action takes 2 hours. If we do the math, we will never get nothing accomplished until we move and make something happen. If we can't trust to get the gritty details of we just got to trust the process to begin, and we have the latitude to come back in 3-6 months to us reassess and make other recommendations.
Yeah, can we just,
Reverend, hold
can I-
on.
okay.
Because to address Reverend Grayson and Richard's concern, I will ask James to bring another exhibit that shows, based on the percentages, what it would look like if you spent up to 2 million. And that would be, again, your guideline, not hard and fast. Further discussion on the.
My recommendation is not to lock in the other half into a category, but to assess as we get the applications in potentially where it needs to go. But if you want to go with back to percentages, it may throw off. We don't know. That's what I'm saying. The leverage of that gives us the ability to readjust and say, we are hearing the needs. We understand the needs. We have the applications. We have 20 applications for this and 2 for this. Therefore, maybe we vote to put it, of that 30% more in this category without locking this into the details of it.
My recommendation is that we don't put a cap. I thought, James and Councilman Lavelle said that, that based on, and you said it too, Reverend Grayson, to a point, that based off of the demands, right, that we can change the allocation. So as long as that's clear, can we put that in writing?
That's
Because,
that's in the guidelines. That is in writing.
Okay, all right. So,
Order of the day.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, that was it. That was it. Just making sure that we can come back. I mean, I don't think that we should put a cap on it. I don't think it should be 2 million, because I really believe that the urgency and the need and the market pressures are going to push this community much further than that. But
Mr.
my
Chair.
belief, is just my belief.
Mr. Chair, I asked you to carry out the motion.
I'm sorry, you broke up with some, Reverend Grayson. Say it again.
I call for the order today and asked if you carry out the motion, whether it goes.
Okay.
He's the motion.
Understood. Reverend Grayson has called the question. Therefore, we now have to vote on his motion to make it a recommendation from 1.5 to 2 million. All those, Julie, can we do a roll call vote?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, one moment, please. Gordon, can you go back to the roll call page? All right, nope, one more, back the other way. Perfect, thank you. So, representative of the Hill CDC, please vote on the motion at hand.
Aye.
No, she.
Excuse me, yay.
Representative for the Hill District Federal Credit Union, please vote.
Yay.
Wesley Center AME Zion Church, please vote.
Yes.
Shenley Heights Community Development Program, please vote.
Yes.
Historic Hill Institute, please vote.
Yay.
Ujamaa Collective, please vote.
Yes.
And those are our voting members. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. So the motion does pass. Is there
Wait a
any
minute.
further?
Julia, I think you missed the Hill
Oh,
District
I'm so-
consensus.
I apologize, Arby. I'm sorry. I please vote. That is my fault. I'm very apologetic.
Thank you, no problem. Yay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the guideline has been affirmatively amended. Is there any further discussion on the guidelines? Or can we move
Yes,
towards?
I have a question where 2 things. One, procedurally, we weren't done with the first round you said you wanted everybody that hadn't spoke to have an opportunity, and then the second round, and then we went directly into a motion. So procedurally, we were out of sorts there. I would like to put forth a motion that we define these categories and answer the questions that the board has raised in writing and amend the allocation plan with those items in writing so that we can read it and understand and be able to present that to the community so that people can follow what's going on. Hello?
Councilman Lavelle.
Patsy had to step away.
I did, I apologize.
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you pick
No,
up.
Go ahead, Marim, because I didn't hear the entirety of his question.
Yeah, RB was wanting, can you go back to the allocation plan, please, James? RB was wanting to get specifics and definitions under each allocation plan, if I understood his question properly. What was not clear to me is if he was asking for us to once again postpone the approval of the allocation plan such that we can move forward with distributing funds while we are waiting for or trying to get those definitions. Which one are you asking for, RB?
Well, what I'm asking for is that there's a couple of things we don't have. We don't clearly understand which each category entails. So that needs to be defined so people can understand that. And then by doing so, you would have an understanding of whether or not the percentage allocated is reasonable. The second thing is, as a advisory board, goals was mentioned by, I can't remember his name, Richard. And we don't have anything in writing regarding our goals. So I think we can tentatively approve this and the concept with the understanding that there could be a revision moving forward, but we need to have some things in writing to define each of the eligible uses so that we can understand it better and have that agreed upon by the advisory board members. And we also need to define what our goals are. If our goals are just to spend money, or if our goals is to reinvest in the Hill District and the people of the Hill District, those things need to be reconciled. So that's my comment. The motion I was trying to put forward is to amend this with those items so that the next meeting we have something definitive and we can move forward.
So it would be my recommendation to proceed with a vote on the actual allocation plan. We can absolutely provide definitions for each eligible use, and that can certainly be done. I think between both the guidelines for this fund as well as the CSIP, it'll be rather simple, but we can certainly do that. I have Alicia's hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I'm back in the office. Thank you, Councilman. It is my understanding from our last couple of meetings that we had two committees, one to work with the allocations and define, and the other one was the applications. It was my understanding that today we were going to agree on these specific allocations based on previous conversations. Then that group with the allocation and budgeting and all of that would then define and give us more examples and roadmap of what each of these things mean. And the same process would occur with the applications. I agree to that. And I would like to see that move forward so we can get this out here quicker instead of going back and forth with the same things. So, I mean, it's my understanding that yes, children and youth initiatives, education initiatives, for example, everything that committee decides that is eligible for that would then be pointed out to us at the next meeting. prior to us issuing these funds and letting people know when we put out these applications. Because I believe the communication is going to be important for the community. And if I'm wrong in assuming that, you know, us volunteering for these communities is no longer in effect, please correct me.
So in terms of the actual funding and reviewing applications, I don't believe there's going to be individual committee, excuse me, to review applications. This body as a whole will review all applications that come in for all respective categories. Are you all prepared to vote?
I'm sorry, I've raised my hand real quick, just or
Okay.
something.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr.
No,
Ellis.
no problem. So I wanted to make a quick motion that will allow us to move forward, that we in our next meeting or by our next meeting, that we have a subcategory under development initiatives that is solely housing. And you know, my reasoning for that is that housing is the primary concern. It's actually not any of the commercial buildings that are going up, et cetera, et cetera. It's really about housing for the historic Hill District, and development initiatives is far too broad. And so I do want to move this forward, but I'm just going to, I'm making a motion right now that by the next meeting, we can have a subcategory of housing under development initiatives.
Properly motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Julie, roll call vote.
Marimba, please vote.
You're on mute, Marimba. You came off mute, Marimba, but we can't.
I'm thinking about the implications of having a subdivision of housing without having a subdivision of other specifics. And I'm also thinking about breaking down one specific category within the allocation plan, which technically, if we're going to break down every portion of the allocation plan, we would break down every single category, which I think could end up being extraneous and overburdensome, both on the committee as well as not beneficial to the community, because then we would be overly prescriptive on what we could actually support. So on the basis of that, I would have to say no, but would be willing to reconsider it in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Witherspoon?
I don't understand what that would mean or the definition of what Dr. Ellis is proposing. So at this time, I would abstain from the vote. I would like to abstain.
Can I explain that? Or I mean, he should know what he's voting on.
The motion was to make a subcategory under development activities to specify housing.
And I don't understand how that would, what money would go toward what process in housing. I don't understand.
Okay.
So,
Well, once I'm trying to be fair, but
Yeah,
once-
well, I abstain. I abstain.
One abstention.
Arby?
Yay.
I believe he said yay.
Thank you. Reverend Grayson?
My answer is yes, in terms of looking at that $500,000 at another meeting, we could figure out what percentage hypothetically that we could put percentage in that category. So I do support housing, yes.
Alicia?
I'm going to go with yes on that because I know how critical housing is. And I'm saying yes with the understanding that we can adjust as we need to. So yes.
Dr. Ellis?
Yay.
And Lakeisha?
So yes, I do agree. And I believe that even in having descriptions for every category, right, being very specific that housing is included in that, right? And that there's a specific process, but I think that people need to be clear that housing is included. So if that is the best way to do that, then I would vote yes.
That is all the voting members. Thank you so much.
Okay, so five in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention, so the motion carries. With that, I would accept a motion from one of the members to approve the allocation plan.
I move that we accept the allocation plan with the necessary correction.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
This one should be easy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Yay.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The allocation plan is approved. With that, I believe next on our agenda is the draft application. Julia?
Thank you so much. So everyone does have a copy of this. I sent it out last week as a PDF. I'm just going to go through it quickly so everyone has a chance to look at it, and we'll come back at the next meeting with, you can have time to digest it, come up with your recommendations, and we can discuss it then. So just really briefly, I'm going to go through it. So applications, any individual or entities seeking funding must submit an application. It must include a description of the applicant's proposed project, a statement on how the project furthers the purpose of this reinvestment fund, a description of timing and method of any disbursements, and any other items requested by this advisory board. Next slide, please, Gordon. And so once this board approves the application, it'll be made into an online fillable PDF, and the application you're going to see today has a URA logo, and it can be replaced with a reinvestment fund logo if and when it becomes available. So it's just a placeholder. Next slide, please. So this is just the intro. When people see the applications, it's just a little history. They'll send them to me, and then I will share them with this reinvestment advisory committee. Next slide, please, Gordon. So section 1 is just some basic information about the applicant. Next slide, please. This is more project specific information because, you know, it might be someone who lives in the Hill District who wants to do a project in a different part of the neighborhood. So just so we have all the relevant information. Next slide, please. And this is so that they can select which category the project falls under. And it could apply to more than one category. So we're requesting that people pick more than one category if that is the case. So this is some information we're requesting. Provide a brief summary of the project, provide a bulleted list of all the activities that will make up the project scope to help determine eligibility for funding. And if this is a new project or initiative, if this is an expansion of an existing project or initiative, or if this is a funding to continue an existing project or initiative. Please state how this project furthers the purpose of the reinvestment fund and what outcomes and impacts does the applicant anticipate realizing from this project, what indicators will be used to measure these outcomes, and then just a description of the proposed timing and method of disbursements. So this is a place where applicants can list the funds they already have if they have some already and provide a current state of funding of each funding source. So just so we have some information going in, so maybe they're just looking for gap funding, maybe they're looking to fund the whole project. And if this is a development project, if they have evidence of site control, we're requesting to see that. This is an attachment checklist, so they might not have all of these things. This is sort of dependent on the project, but in case, you know, if that is an improvement project for physical improvements before photos, if they have drawings already of a proposed development project, the project renderings, most recent financial audit, their current annual budget, if it's a nonprofit, a map of showing where the project is located, documentation of site control, an itemized project budget, and evidence of secured matching funds. All right, next slide, please. If there's any certificates, we'd like to see them. And this is just a list of questions we came up as we were working on this. Advisory board has seen this list before. I think it generated some good conversation, so just wanted to share it again. But again, this was just a quick overview so everyone has time to see it, and then you open the floor for conversation.
Thank you, Julia. Is there any questions? Dr. Ellis?
Yes, thank you. So can we go back to the allotment category? So I want to show you all this because this is a part of what I'm talking about. You see how there's no housing listed? If I want to do something for my house, I think I'll find my way. Do I check development investments? Do I check project development within the Greater Hill District? You see how that's not clear? And the housing is the #1 concern in the Hill District. So this is why.
So given your prior motion, Dr. Ellis, under development initiatives, there would now be a subsection that actually says housing.
Right. So can we? But we want to send this out like immediately, right?
So we can, if you all are comfortable, take a vote today to accept this as the application. The intent was to have you all review it, make sure you are comfortable. If you need additional time, we can also adopt it at our next board meeting.
I would suggest that we be very clear about what exactly we're looking to do for housing. If the goal, because I heard multiple things from different committee members, if the goal is to provide essentially repair assistance, things that, for example, Rebuilding Together already provides, things that the Housing Opportunity Fund already provides. But if we're looking to add to that pool of funding, even though sometimes those aren't oversubscribed, then we should have a category called for housing repairs and improvements. We should not put that under development initiatives because technically it's not a development initiative unless it's a housing development. So I just want to be clear on what the intent is for the people who want to see housing called out specifically. Are we looking to support individual residents? If so, we should call that out, not within development initiatives, but as a separate category. If we are looking to support housing development, then that should go under housing initiatives. I think it's called in the other section. So what is the intent? If everybody could speak on that, particularly for those who voted to include it.
I'll let everybody speak before I say anything else again.
Okay, Ms. George, your hand is up.
I wanted to address something different. Go right ahead with this conversation, Councilman.
Thank you, Arby.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we need to have descriptions, not something that's rigid. We need to have descriptions so that we and people that are applying can understand what the category is intended for. So this application is more focused on brick and mortar and not people. So that needs to be addressed. There are other things besides housing or repair assistance, things of that nature that need to be addressed in the application because people have other needs. The other funds that have been mentioned apparently aren't enough because people still have the need. So we need to recognize that. Previously, in the previous meeting, I asked for how these other funds are serving the needs of the Hill District, and I haven't gotten that. And that was in February. So we don't know what the Housing Opportunity Fund is doing. We don't know how people on the Hill are being served, if their needs are being satisfied. There's quite a few things that we don't know. So we need to provide more information in this application. And it also needs to be focused more on people and less on brick and mortar.
So my recommendation to help us move forward is we're not in a position for this application to be approved today. It's been asked that we provide descriptions to each one of these categories, and I would then have the descriptions be a part of the application. And so when we see it next time, we'll ensure that we have descriptions as part of the actual application so that people will fully understand what they're applying to.
Thank you, Councilman. I am still looking for some clarity, however, on is the intent of the people who voted on the committee, who voted for housing, was the intent to see more investment in housing development, or was the intent to see more investment in individual home repairs, or both? Because that we can't actually do the descriptions or appropriate allocations without knowing that. So if everybody could speak to that, I would appreciate that.
Just my 2 cents, remember, based upon prior conversations, it is both, based upon what I've heard this committee discuss. But Lakeisha, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I believe that is definitely both. And in the application, the end of the application, the section 4 attachments checklist, you know, thinking about somebody from the community who wants to protect their housing, right, by building it up and doing the things to invest in their own family's wealth, right, with their home. This thing, you know, because this reads very much for somebody who's running a nonprofit or somebody who is doing high level development, and is not necessarily reading for somebody who lives in the neighborhood and who wants to see themselves and their neighbors developed, right, on a real grassroots level. And so I wanted to say that, right, because it's like your most recent financial audit, right? Families aren't going to have that. So, you know, what are we asking a family to provide, right? If they own a home, right, in order to be able to apply, right? Like what would they need to have? What would they need to show, right? And then the other thing that comes up around this and thinking about even the way that the URA approaches like commercial development is, hold on, just lost my train of thought. Oh, like technical assistance, right? Is that right? If somebody needed support in order to fill out this application, right? Like if, you know, I think that one is we should do everything we can do to make this as accessible as possible. But then also, you know, where can we offer support to make sure that folks are able to do this, and that that when they submit the application, right, we're not in a position to turn people away because they didn't know how to get the information right on this paper. So those are my concerns.
I totally agree with Lakeisha.
Those were the, oh, I'm sorry, Kim.
No, it's okay. And I just want to add, because I'm making my comments at the end of people's comments about housing. That with this application, I think that there should be 2 layers to the application. The very first part should be like, what's your project and what do you want to do, and what does this fit, right? Everything else that should come secondary, because this present application, it reads exactly like Lakeisha said. And by the way, and under F, under mortgage assistance is misspelled. I know that's really small, but so yeah, I mean, I just think that for me, it's both in terms of the housing. And I would say that first is actually housing repair, right? Preserve what we already have. We'll never see these kind of bricks again. I'm sure that many of you, well, anyway, we'll never see the kind of bricks and mortar and things like that we have in the Hill District right now. So preservation and repairs is first in my mind. Secondly would be housing development, because we know that half of our neighborhood is empty. So we definitely need more housing. But I think for this, so Councilman Lavelle, I thought we were, well, if we're going to make improvements on this application, can we have another meeting next week so that we can just push forward this application, because people do need to get started.
I also want to get to the technical part of that. Lakeisha, you did hit on two I want to talk about with the attachments list, making it more homeowner and resident friendly. But also in section 1, instead of just the organization, maybe we get the name of the person submitting the application and email contact for them, because I don't want to look up later and see it's the same person with 4 different applications. We're a small community. A lot of us do a lot of different things, but also too, I think if we had any questions, we can contact that person directly. So can we just add that to the applicant information, please? The name of the person submitting and their contact info.
Mr. Lavelle.
Reverend Grayson?
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing in terms of initially, it's not as personalized for an individual. So when you see where it starts off as organization's name, it should have a line organization's name or individual names. And there are places in the application that you would say not applicable for an individual. So you would need a 990 for an individual or some things. I think that could be spelled out as they go through the application. So if it's not germane to the individual, we simply say we don't need that. So I think, again, giving us the month or at least 2 weeks to tweak it, I think we could I don't think we can do it tonight at all because there's too many other unanswered questions, but I think it shouldn't take long to more personalize it, adding the housing piece. So what I think we're responding a lot to what we've added with the housing and individuals. So it's this present application was not set up the same way. So now that we know that, I think it shouldn't be hard to tweak it to include with the description some more detail of definitely personalizing it to the entire community, not only nonprofits, for-profits, but individuals.
Okay, agreed, Reverend Grayson. Hannah?
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to backtrack for a second to clarify if the advisory board is asking URA staff to propose definitions for each of the categories, or if that is something that the application committee will do, or if it's something we'll do at a future meeting together. If you could provide some clarity.
I believe we were asking the URA to provide those categories, but my recommendation would be for us, and I'm willing to work with you on it, Hannah, for us to review what is already in the CSIP as well as the actual guidelines for the fund and adopt those and move those over to be reflective.
That makes sense. Julia and I can certainly work on that for the next meeting. Thank you.
On that point, Hannah, I would also suggest that it's a matter of providing an example, like several examples, as opposed to being, like I said, overly prescriptive. I think if we try to be overly prescriptive, we're not going to be able to respond to the needs of the community because we don't know exactly what people are going to need, right? So if it's not named expressly, people might turn away from submitting their application because it's not expressly named. So I would say examples include, but are not limited to, is how I would approach that.
Okay.
While I'm here, I would suggest that we break out the application into 3 distinct sections. I would suggest that we do one for-profit organizations, that we do one for individuals, and that we do one for nonprofits. And I would workflow that by having, when somebody comes to the application, welcome to the Greater Hill District Learner Fund, are you a for-profit business applying, a nonprofit, or an individual, and let them click, and then the application should reflect who they are. So this would be appropriate, for example, for a development project for a nonprofit, or a workforce development project, or a job placement program, or many other things for a nonprofit. Some things would need to come out, some things may stay, but largely this would make sense for for-profit and nonprofit, maybe not so much for an individual. And so that would be my recommendation. And largely you could just copy the same one and make revisions moving forward. So hopefully that will simplify things because otherwise I don't think we'll ever get to a really solid application. Thank you.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Any other comments?
I just wanted to just reiterate again, the, I guess, question or concern, right? And just kind of hearing other folks' thoughts around. And I think, I think that Marimba's point around having the sort of first page portal when people kind of choose which flow they're going to go into, if it's for profit, nonprofit, whatever. But again, how, if there's somewhere in the process where folks need support, right, that whole technical assistance piece, right, thinking about what that could look like.
Understood. Arby?
Yes, we need to put a map with this application showing the alerted district, because the funds must be spent within the district. So the people will be aware of their boundaries and where the money can be spent. And I would like, it seems like we have a lot of questions and comments on the application. So perhaps to move forward quickly, perhaps we should endeavor to have a markup for those that have comments or questions and submit that within the next week or two, and then we can move forward, because there is a desire to move forward in an expeditious manner. So anybody have any comments in that regard?
I do, Arby. I would strongly recommend that we let the URA proceed with the 3-tiered mock-up of the individual application, the for-profit application, and the business application. They can design it in a way where no information is required in order to submit, so that everybody can kind of get the experience. If they want to test it out, they can actually test it out. We may need to tweak the individual one quite a bit before they wireframe that on the actual web, but we'll spend more time kind of trying to do this in Word than if they were to just put it, going ahead and build out the site. So that would be my recommendation.
And I would also
I have a,
simply ask that if members had very specific, as some of you have already done, things that you would like to see as a part of this checklist, such as including the categories with descriptions, if you would please email Julia that information so they could have it as they're doing the revisions in the manner in which Marimba described.
okay, I have a question. With the application, and it may be a part of the guidelines, but do we have a sort of like a universal policy on what the eligibility is, so that if we should have a policy so that we won't fall into a trap of approving one for one and for someone and not approving someone else, but they have like applications and we turn them down for various reasons that aren't applicable to a policy. Will we have a policy to give to people when we give them an application, so they'll know if they fit in or if they're eligible?
If I understand your question correctly, what we could do is provide the purpose of the fund on sort of the front end, as well as what the intention of the fund is, so that they understand that on the front end as well.
And what will we give them? How will they know if they qualify? Will we give them guidelines also, as to eligibility, so that it would be uniform? We don't want to arbitrarily say yay to one and nay to another, and but we don't have any type of policy or guidelines to lean on, and that may expose us to litigation.
Mr. Witherspoon, this is Hannah. The only restrictions to eligible uses for this fund, as far as I'm aware, are what's listed in the guidelines. And I dropped that language into the chat a few minutes ago. So I think, but I do believe it's within this board's right to create a policy or limit eligibility. And if you would like, URA staff can work on some suggestions.
I think that would be beneficial so that we're not exposed.
Richard, can you work with the URA on that if that's your concern? My primary concern is that it's in the Hill District, right? Like not that you're from the Hill District trying to do a project in another neighborhood or something like that, but that the actual project is in the neighborhood.
That's right.
So, you know, that's my primary concern. I also think we should consider, you know, demonstrated need. So for example, if, you know, you need to make improvements on your home, but clearly you, for example, are quite capable of making improvements on your home based on your income, right? Should that fall before or after someone who clearly doesn't have the income to make the improvements to their home? I think that there are some judgment and, you know, some moral calls and some judgment calls that we need to make relative to need. So those are the two things that immediately come to mind for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of, I guess, like echo that maybe at the start of the application, right? Like when I think about as a nonprofit, sometimes you go to a foundation site, right? And you have to meet this checklist, right? But then it's also, you know, stating clearly that priority is given to, right, folks who are low income, right, who can prove that there's a need, priority given to a Hill District resident business, right? Like those are folks that perhaps, right, if we're, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but you know, being in this neighborhood, that's what I believe, you know, we're holding true to, that we want to prioritize folks who are here, right, and their needs first, and then other folks who want to come in and do something in the neighborhood, like, you know, we, you know, weigh out all of those things, but that we would, you know, if there was a similar project between two people and somebody has a track record here, right, that we would give priority perhaps to somebody who's here, right, or whatever those weights are, that we kind of name out some of those things at the forefront.
I agree. Those disclaimers, it sounds, should be a part of the application so that people will know, you know, the parameters from which we're going to make our decision from. So that would be helpful.
Noted. Are there any other hands up right now? Or are they?
Yeah, my hand is up.
Okay, Kimberly.
Sorry, you all, I forgot. This was in one of my initial concerns, but we had a really robust discussion. Julia, can you go back to the description of the LRTA? I don't know what page it's on. Yeah, I think, oh, I don't know where it is, but you showed it on the screen when you were, yeah, I think it's forward. Further. Yeah, further. It has like a full description of what the actual, there we go. And I don't know when this was created, but can we just tweak this a little bit? One, to describe who the developer actually is. I think it's really important to know where these monies are coming from, who made this deal, et cetera, et cetera. And I have no problem also adding a part of the history of the LRTA on this page as well, if that's, you know, if you all find that appropriate. I'm fine with that, but I want to make it clear where this money is coming from, who the developer actually is, especially since First National Bank is named, right? So the developer is not like a mysterious entity. This is the Buccini Poland Group. It's the Lower Hill Development Team. And then they took out a loan with the First National Bank. So I just asked that we fix that.
Sorry,
Noted.
Dr. Ellis.
No problem.
That's on me. I'll fix that.
Well, let me respond to that if I may. That I would suggest that we take that under new business and bring that up when Councilman Lavelle is able to rejoin the conversation. My only concern with that is, one, the developer is going to change from site to site on the Lower Hill District. FMB is not going to make all of the loans on the Lower Hill District. The application is not going to change dependent upon the developer or who made the initial loan. I would move that we strike all of that language because the developer is not one developer for the entire district and not one bank or building or project for the entire district.
Sorry, I think for this, I would not strike the language. People need to really understand how this happened and what happened. And so we can put a date, right? We can put a date on this and we can continue to update according to the date. So if the developer changes, if there's some other change and it affects later, other funds, I'm fine with that. We can continue to update. But for now, with this initial $7.18 million that the community is going to start to use, they should know who the developer is and what happened.
Okay, noted, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah, so
David?
Julia, Julia,
we're going
be
to
in
call
touch
that
with
to
that.
a vote when Councilman Lavelle can join us.
No, Julia already said, remember, please don't start. Julia already said that she will correct that. This is literally a point of fact. It's nothing that needs to be voted on. It literally says the developer over and over again. The developer are actual people.
No, the developer is an actual company that you work
An
for.
actual no,
David?
yes. So
Okay,
first of all,
sisters,
hold on. Everybody on this call knows that I work for the Lower Hill
I don't know that
Redevelopment
everyone
Team.
does. There are several.
Well, I'm sorry. Let me make it clear. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kimberly Ellis. I've been a Hill resident for the last 40 plus years. I've done a lot of things, including with the Hill CDC and Marimba, who constantly wants to throw shade at these meetings. I work for the Lower Hill Redevelopment Team, and I work specifically for the developer, the Buccini Poland Group. And what I'm specifically asking is that the developer's name be added as well as the Lower Hill Redevelopment Team so that people can understand what we as a community did together.
Noted.
Thank you. And so Julia already said she was going to make that change. This
Julia,
is not
at
about
the
waiting for
discretion
a
of the
vote.
advisory committee. We'll get back to you on that. Kim.
Well,
David?
can I make?
Can I just say something quickly, Kim and Marimba?
Well, hold on,
Enough,
Lakeisha.
enough,
Hold on, Lakeisha.
enough.
David is up next. David Geiger, then Lakeisha, then Arby.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, actually.
Well,
So since this has to be brought to a vote, which it wasn't initially supposed to be brought to a vote, but if that's the case, I'd like to make a motion.
well, there are several revisions that would have to be made. And I think that you can propose language. Are you prepared to actually propose that language now?
Yes, I'm prepared
In
to propose
writing?
the language
Okay,
now.
put it in the chat and we can actually discuss that. David and then Lakeisha.
Yeah, hi. David Geiger, Senior Advisor at the URA. I will defer obviously to the board in any outcome of motions and votes, but just wanted to provide a staff clarification that I apologize. I have not reviewed the language that is currently on screen as drafted by staff. I helped draft sort of the guidelines that, administer the fund. The application is supposed to be an exhibit of those guidelines. I am happy to work with Julia and the rest of the URA staff to restructure some language and bring it back to the board at the next meeting for sort of review and approval along with the entire set of guidelines. But I agree that this language could use a lot of work based on my understanding of the Lower Hill LRTA as well as the fund and fund guidelines. So I will take responsibility for that. My apologies to the board. Please allow staff to go back and refresh this language and provide an updated draft to the board. I apologize.
Thank you,
Thank you.
David. Lakeisha?
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, thank you, David. And I was gonna say that, you know, I think that there should be a brief history section. I do agree that there, you know, generally speaking, there needs to just be more transparency, right? In language that people can understand. And I hear, you know, and I also understand that, you know, that this development is ongoing. And I think that that just needs to be stated in this language, right? And I don't think that it's really about, because it doesn't, you know, in this specific context, it doesn't matter, you know, who actually works on, you know, for the developer per se. It's really about the fact that the developer and developers are doing this work, and this is where this money is coming from. And so that I think that as this changes and as time goes on and more folks are in the mix doing development in the Lower Hill where these funds are going to be generated from, that then we just update that language. But I think that language can be included now that speaks to the fact that this is an ongoing process.
Thank you, Lakeisha. And to be clear, the money is a payment in lieu of taxes. That's very important for people to understand.
Yeah, and that should be in there, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But this is
That should be in there as well.
This is not a grant from a specific developer. This is not money that a developer is giving because they, you know, felt particularly obligated.
Right. Well, no, I think that the language clearly says that now, that
Exactly.
that it's a tax increment. Yeah, so.
Can I just finish?
Please do.
And so I think it's very important, or if we're going to get specific, and we can spend time in committee talking about language. We don't really need to take up the board's time talking about that, and we can present information back. Alicia?
I'm sorry, I was just ready to move that we have the URA do the draft, and that we as a board get all of these technicalities and issues and concerns to Julia within a week, so that then we could get a final draft before us and that we don't have to wait longer than 2 weeks. That's all. I just wanted to move this forward a little bit, Marimba.
I 100% agree.
We have yet to approve that the URA will create a draft with our changes.
You can entertain that, you can present that motion, Alicia, formally.
I move that the board.
I'm sorry, excuse me. So I suggested that I would make a motion, and you insisted that I put the corrective language in the comments. David actually expressed what should happen, would happen, took responsibility, and now you're telling Alicia to make a motion. Like, this is ridiculous, Marimba. It's ridiculous.
Would you like to make the motion?
Yeah, I'm saying this so that the language that you are suggesting can get in there within a week. Julie can put it in a draft, and we can collectively then vote on the individual amendments or edits to this application.
Alicia, can you please finish your motion?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Alicia. I'm just saying that, you know, that I initially, this is what I made the motion to do. This is what Julia said she would do.
There's a motion on the floor, y'all.
Thank you, Kim. Please go ahead, Alicia.
Let's please commit, let's get them.
I made it. Do you need me to make it again?
Can we get a second there, please?
Second.
All in favor? Can we do a roll call?
Shouldn't need a roll call. Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We
Is
have
there anyone against?
Julia, so she has time, or the URA staff has time.
Is there anyone against?
I'm not against. Just please add me as a co-motion person in the record.
Is anyone abstaining? All right, the motion is approved. Moving on the agenda, is there any new business that needs to be addressed?
Yes. There's a couple things from past meetings that we have not addressed. One, we asked for an audit of the funds and what's
Hold
in
on,
the
Arby,
funds.
we do have a section for old business. So we'll get to the old items under old business. I just want to know if there are any new items we need to address. One new item that I would like to put on the table is that there is a development activities meeting coming up where Hill District residents can give their input on the forthcoming presentation of the development of Block E for the Lower Hill District. That is scheduled for October 17th at, I believe, 6 p.m. This is the only formal mechanism to provide your input to the city on the proposed new development for Block E that is planned for a music venue and a small amount of retail, but a very large music venue. So want to make sure that all committee members are aware and that you make sure you share that with your constituent group.
I have a new item as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to announce that the Hill Collaborative Voices and the Hill Consensus Group is having a meeting on October 3rd. This is literally to allow for the Lower Hill presentation on Block E to answer any questions that you have. They're going to review and score the Block E development in accordance with the Greater Hill District Master Plan. And I will put the link for everybody to RSVP in the chat.
Thank you, Kim. Any old business?
Yes,
Go ahead.
there are several items from previous meetings that have not been addressed. I would like to have those items addressed at the next meeting. I will send an email. I will also say that muting a board member is unacceptable, and we need to do something about that, because I saw where I was muted and you were having this unreasonable conversation. So we need to address that at the next meeting also. Thank you.
Thank you, RB. Are there any other comments or questions under old business?
Just, I don't know if it's old or new, Marimba.
Mm-hmm.
My only question is, I know a lot's been said and something was passed in terms of, and I know it's a public record, in terms of what gets out from this day, in terms of, you know, do we leave here with a statement saying that what's been approved, would this these meetings on this 3rd, or just want clarity on our position on what I know we're not finished, but do we is there anything confirmed that we can say we have agreed on, just for confirmation of information to the general public, just for clarity?
Oh, I think we can certainly share with the public what was voted on today.
Okay.
And I mean, it's a public meeting. It's shared publicly on the URA's website. So I see no reason why that can't be communicated. If you're asking for a date certain, I don't think we arrived at that today, but I think that the sense of urgency has been agreed upon by all committee members, and that, you know, we are moving as urgently as possible to get the application released. So I think it's in short order.
Thank you. That's why I wanted for clarity that we did agree upon a range and the budget for the 2023, and that the application and other things are tweaked but forthcoming. I just want to make sure as word gets out that we could share that information.
Yes, that was formally voted on.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved by Lakeisha. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against?
Aye.
Anyone abstaining? This meeting is adjourned at 5:27. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.